I would think for the price of a MIG welder and a bandsaw, just to start practicing on it. We took the welding class at Chemeketa in the evening. It was an adult class. We took it with a bunch of guys and enjoyed it. And welding's kind of entertaining. It doesn't work well when you're in a huge hurry, but if you have a little bit of time, it's a good skill to know. Just because you need something welded that broke. Now you have to take it to a fab shop to have somebody do it. There's a full day, and you got to convince them that you need it right now, where you roll the welder over and fix it. Took you 8 minutes is a huge plus. And it's not, on metalwork, it's not that intimidating. The worst you're going to do is fail. You need to know a successful weld versus an unsuccessful weld, and then try it. You'll get better at it pretty quick.
From the Oregon State University Extension Service, this is PolliNation, a podcast that tells the stories of researchers, land managers, and people like you who are making bold strides to improve the health of pollinators. I'm your host, Dr. Adoni Melathopoulos, Associate Professor of Pollinator Health in the Department of Horticulture. Welcome. This is our commercial beekeeping segment with Harry Vanderpool from Vanderpool Farms. Harry, tell us a little bit about our guest today.
Oh, it's just awesome that we're going to talk today with Nick VanCalcar of VanCalcar Apiaries, Amity, Oregon. I met Nick on the edge of a meadow foam field maybe 20 years ago. Kenny Williams introduced me to him. We shook hands. 5 minutes later, he was pulling me out of the mud.
Oh, God.
Ever since then, on and off, some years and others, we pollinate together in various crops. And one thing I can say about Nick, if he says he's going to be there at 8 o'clock, it's not 7:59 or 8:01. He is 8 o'clock. It's like a miracle. And one thing about that is important in beekeeping is do what you say you're going to do. And Nick is a really good example of that.
I think this episode's great because you can Nick's character really comes through, and you're prompting. We have kind of focused this episode on being able to fabricate for yourself, how important fabrication is within a beekeeping operation.
Yeah, it takes dedication, Nick talks about, and it takes some grit. And he's put that to the road and done very well in his operation.
Well, let's head right into the interview. Let's build some equipment this week on PolliNation.
Welcome everyone to PolliNation. And today we have the great pleasure of talking with Nick VanCalcar of VanCalcar Apiaries out of Amity, who is someone that I've worked on and off with over the years, and he has a lot of interesting things going on and to talk about. So we're ready to go.
Fantastic. Well, welcome, Nick. And why don't you tell us how your operation got started?
Boy, that's a question. So ultimately, my family shield is a beehive. I didn't know that until I had already signed the papers to purchase half of my boss's business and had been a beekeeper for 13 years. I went to a little tiny private grade school, of which was interactive with parents. 2 of the parents were beekeepers, and my brother, who's 8 years older than me, one of his best friends' parents were beekeepers. So beekeeping was always around me. I remember my brother had a 4-H hive when we would all watch out the window as they got stung and the hive swarmed way up in the apple tree. And then when I got into high school, my brother and his friends who had been beekeeping were finishing college and disappearing. And I got called from Dave and Rose, "Hey, you interested in beekeeping?" I was 16 years old. And I said, "You bet." And I went out with one of their sons, picked me up every morning. One of the other sons, Scott, worked with us. And then one of Scott and Mike, or Dan being my brother's buddies, Mike, also worked that summer, and I loved it. Had a great time. Did a little bit of extracting every other day. Mike did the extracting every other day, If it had been all extracting, I would have been done with that. But the beekeeping, taking off honey, putting boxes on was fabulous. And working with my brother's buddies was great. And then
Nice.
it went on, and I happened to be there, be the right age to still be there with enough experience to take over half of the business. When Dave and Rose retired, another employee took the other half.
How did you buy your way into the business? What was that?
It ended up being a lease purchase for tax reasons, where Dave and Rose carried the note. So on an accounting thing, if I had bought it and they carried it, all of the taxes would have been due for them. So they couldn't afford that. So we did a lease where I made payments for 14 years to pay it off. Which wouldn't have worked any other way. I didn't have any money to put up for it or the ability to get a loan for it. That's a sort of a silly thing to write a loan around. Something that can all die in 6 months of neglect or 3 months of neglect. And ultimately it worked out well for both of us, both me and Dave and Rose.
Dave Kerr is a beekeeper, but he was, as far as prior to selling his business, a very notable beekeeper around the Willamette Valley, very integrated with a lot of the beekeepers that we know, and is a fine mentor. And to a lot of people, he has helped me on a couple projects. Dave and Rose are as good a people as you're going to find. And so I'm jealous, Nick. You really had great mentors. Actually, I did too. Awesome.
I still call Dave with bee questions, and certainly with mechanical or fabricating or general scheme ideas. He's a good guy to bounce ideas off, and he will share till I can't think of anything else to share.
Nice.
Well, maybe that brings us to our next question. Clearly, some people who are hobby beekeepers, they buy everything. It's all pre-made. They just have to staple it and maybe paint it, maybe not even that. But commercial operation does require custom built equipment to make things work efficiently, to use labor efficiently. Can you tell us how you developed your skills in fabricating, and what are some of the sort of significant fabrication projects that you've been involved in?
So my fabricating 10 years started by watching Dave, who built most everything, rather wood, concrete, or metal. He was busy doing it and doing well with it. He made forklifts. The one he still uses, it still has it. We still borrow it occasionally. He built, I think, in the early 80s. Lots of things that you would buy out of a bee catalog, Dave would make himself. And I watched him do it, and it was interesting. And then when I was going to buy the business, we were sorting that out, Ryan is a buddy of mine who worked for Dave and Rose also. We took a welding class and learned that it's really not that hard. And then Dave kept his forklift. The other one went to the other beekeeper, and I got the half finished one that Dave had started, with Ryan and I going to finish it by January to start moving bees. So the first thing I bought as a new beekeeper was a MIG welder and a bandsaw, and we started fabricating in the shop to finish the forklift. We got it done, minus a couple little things. It worked great. Ryan weld, I cut, and we discussed all of the parts and stuff, and we went and looked at Dave's and asked Dave's, and we got it done, and it worked well. And then the next year, we bought another old pickup and built the second one.
Well, how many of those forklifts have you fabricated?
So I have the first one that Ryan and I finished. That's the one that burned up in the fire. The second one that Ryan and I built, I still have that. And then Ryan and I started another one, then he moved away, and I ended up getting Dave to finish it. And then the one that Dave built for Andy, when he was starting the one he was building for me, I bought that from Andy. So I have 3 of them here that we use regularly. And then we've been borrowing Dave's when we go to California, so we could take 2 with us. And then there's 2 up here. This year I actually, well, I guess this year still 24. I actually bought one of those little green Avant loaders or articulated, just because I was feeling being a burden on Dave to keep his running for me to borrow for 3 weeks when the bees were being shipped. And that works out well. The guys, we have a little trailer, they put it on there, they take it to the loading yard, and it stays there as we're getting the bees ready to ship. We can unload trucks with it and then load the semi trucks with it.
Wait, can you describe? I can't imagine. I could imagine, having a fabrication project where you're putting something onto a forklift, but fabricating a forklift, I don't quite understand. How do you do this?
Oh, well, you buy a 3/4 ton pickup truck,
It's based on a truck body.
buy the truck, and then you strip the body off
Oh,
down
wow.
to where it's now a frame with your motor and your transmission, your drive line and your axles in it. And then you take the rear drive line out and you cut the springs off, and you roll that rear axle forward till you want it, which in this case is 83 inches from the front axle, center to center. And then you make mounting on the bottom of the frame that it bolts to, with a U-bolt that holds it in place. There's no suspension on that end. You leave the front end how it is. And then you cut off the front bumper, cut your frame back, and weld on a new bumper that's the right size. And then on your rear end of the truck, the rear part of the frame, you put in a cross member that will hold the mast, and you have to weld up, fabricate all those brackets that will hold the mast and then hold the tip cylinders. And you get the mast off of an old used forklift at the repair shop that's on its way to the scrapyard. And then you call the hydraulic place and you order a pump and you order a Charlene steering pump and basically mock up what Dave did with his. It works pretty well. One thing we changed is we made an openable hood. So there's a tongue that hooks up to the truck. And then when you want to tow it, you put the transfer case, you put the transmission in neutral, then the transfer case in neutral, double check to make sure the transfer case is in neutral, and you're good to go. Don't forget to close the hitch. Oh yeah, so the hood. So then we have a little winch that raises and lowers the tongue, and it sits on top of the hood, and then you can open the hood to work on the engine, where the one Dave still had 2 panels you had to take out, and it was one on each side, and it was really hard to get in to do any maintenance on the engine. He was good at it, but I couldn't even get my hands in there or see. Part of that has to do with Dave being a good mechanic, me being a fletchling, turn some screws and hope kind of guy.
As an egghead, I don't understand anything you said, so I'm going to let Harry do the follow-up question.
Well, I've got to tell you, I built one of these, and it all began when I got to drive one of them that we're talking about here, that Dave made, or that Nick made. And I got off the first time I drove one, it was like, I have absolutely got to have one of these. And during the building process, just bouncing off the question you just asked Nick, how do you do that? I just rang Nick's phone off the wall for like a year or a year and a half, getting good tips and guidance and, things that you wouldn't think about, design objectives, particularly design objectives. And, every machine has its advantages and disadvantages, but for me and Nick and a couple other people I know, I wouldn't have any other forklift than a towable forklift like Nick and I have. And the speed.
What's the advantage over buying an articulated forklift from the factory?
No trailer. I get there, I unhook it, I drive it around, move the truck wherever I want, point the truck out of the yard, hook the forklift up. You do all that with a trailer, you have to trailer in the way. You have to, guys who use the articulated ones or the Bobcats, I'm sure there are fabulous trailer backer uppers. I would improve greatly if I had that situation, but mine is lightning quick. I unhook it, it takes 15 seconds to have it unhooked. It takes about 20 to have it hooked up. That's taking it out of gear and hooking it up. No chains involved other than your tow chains you got to hook up. That's my biggest advantage. The second one is I can drive my forklift backwards because it's an automatic transmission quite rapidly if I need to. So in the almond orchard, I can go zipping down the rows when they're nice and flat. smooth at 30 miles an hour, where the guy on the little articulated one is putting along at 7 and feeling like he's really, really going fast. On the transverse of that, all the beekeepers who have those loaders don't drive their bees down the orchard rows anymore. They all put them around in easier spots.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So they modified that problem in a different way.
So it's very interesting, Nick's answer, because when I was building mine, well, first of all, Nick's got a 350 Chevy in those things. You get on that thing and it's a hot rod. There's just no two ways about it. It's a hot rod. So I built mine to be a hot rod. And the whole time I'm building, I'm thinking speed, man, this thing's gonna be fast. But really what Nick said to begin with is the real speed of it. And that is you pull up and you're unhooked and unloading in a minute. The speed is that it's towable and there's no trailer. And as soon as you get in the yard, you're unloading right now. And same with when you're done, you hook it up and you're driving off in a minute. And that's awesome. And I really will never forget how much help you gave me on that, Nick. It really, really is something I really enjoy. I enjoy the darn thing.
I mean, maybe this raises this next question of, if you were to give general advice to a new beekeeper who's looking at having to pick up the skills to do fabrication or outsourcing the work, what would your advice be? Would it be the same as yours? Go take a welding class, find a mentor, or has the stuff that's come off the shelf improved or got worse? What's the advice?
Off the shelf stuff, I think is probably all over the board. There's probably lots of good stuff to buy. Good stuff is often expensive. That's a plus minus relationship with expense. Sometimes expensive and working is way better than cheap and not working, or trying to save money and wasting time. As far as fabricating your own stuff, a lot of that depends on what size of operation a person is running. If you have 5 hives going to go to 10, maybe up to 20, there's not that much fabricating you're going to do. If you're starting, you're already at 1,000 hives or 500 hives and wanting to do more, and you're going to be expanding your extracting facility, you're going to be introducing new trucks into your outfit, maybe new trailers and new loaders, perhaps. I would think for the price of a MIG welder and a bandsaw, just to start practicing on it. We took the welding class at Chemeketa in the evening. It was an adult class. We took it with a bunch of guys and enjoyed it. And welding's kind of entertaining. It doesn't work well when you're in a huge hurry, but if you have a little bit of time, it's a good skill to know. Just because you need something welded that broke. Now you have to take it to a fab shop to have somebody do it. There's a full day, and you got to convince them that you need it right now, where you roll the welder over and fix it. Took you 8 minutes is a huge plus. And it's not, on metalwork, it's not that intimidating. The worst you're going to do is fail. You need to know a successful weld versus an unsuccessful weld, and then try it. You'll get better at it pretty quick, and you might have some fun doing it as well.
Nick, I'm sitting here looking at those tanks behind you in your room there. Who built those?
There's 3 of those. I built the middle one.
Oh, wow.
And the other 2 were ones that Dave had. Those have been in use my entire beekeeping career and earlier. I know Dave added probably 18 inches to the top of them to add capacity in the last few years. To build it, I drew up a little picture and took it to BBC Steel and Canby, and the guy asked a couple questions, and I said, great. And I answered them, and then he sent me a little quote, and I said, great. And then he built it, and I picked it up, and I had to weld the bottom. I had to weld the sides together up one side and weld the bottom on, and then put the nipple on the bottom and plumb it, and then build the stand. Not very hard.
But impressive. Very impressive.
Yeah, and that I don't remember any of the numbers, but it would probably cost me 20% to have a brand new tank versus buying one similar size that was used that you didn't know what was in it before.
Yeah, right.
Put food grade honey in, or to put honey in, which is obviously going to be used for food.
The final question. I remember when I was in northern Alberta, they had a beekeeping course. that didn't survive, but a number of great beekeepers came through that and they learned queen rearing and in California, they went down to California, they mirrored good commercial queen breeders. They brought the technology back in, they learned fabrication. And I just wonder, when you see new beekeepers coming in, what do you think are their biggest educational challenges? And, what do they need to know to be successful in the next decade?
The first point of success, which I've gotten away with several times, beekeeping is an up and down game. You're going to have good years, you're going to have bad years. If you're buying some new bees, you're going to have a good year to start with, followed by a lesser year, as your second winter with older queens is going to be way different. The biggest thing is, don't get yourself over your head financially. Don't get strung out with loans. I built one of these barns. I built with credit cards. I got a $20,000 convenient check on this one, a $50,000 convenient check on that one, and ultimately it was enough to buy the materials to build the barn. Well, now you had 9 months to pay it off before those interest rates changed, and I ended up getting a USDA loan. I was still a new farmer at that point, so I got away with getting the loan to cover that. Otherwise, I was headed for a sinking ship quickly, trying to pay those back. And since then, I've really only borrowed to buy new equipment. So you're getting an equipment loan on it. I have a a line of credit that I've used a couple times to get out just at the end of the year till you start getting your California check in. But when the beekeeping turns south on you, you can't have a big lineup of bills to pay. It'll eat you up quick. And you lost a whole bunch of bees and you have to rebuild them. Well, now you're looking at a little different financial situation where the money coming in is going to all get poured right back into those bees. There's not much to take out of it to pay yourself with. You have to be wise of the help you're using to keep that within the bounds of affordability. And if you borrowed a bunch of money and your bees went south and now you're running at 75% of what you had figured, those numbers aren't going to add up. And my experience is that happens every few years. Something doesn't go right. Something gets overlooked, or Mother Nature turns the corner on you and you didn't recognize it in time.
Definitely a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yep.
Harry and I were talking earlier about the importance, and maybe this came up in your experience of just having a mentor and being able to have somebody point, the education that you need is somebody who's run this business before, and to know the 5-year cycles and, to get a sense of how this runs before you really commit.
Yeah. So I kept bees with Dave and Rose in the summer, all through high school and college. I dropped out once, kept bees for the spring. And then after that, I worked for them for 4.5 years before they retired, working all season. That was invaluable, and their wisdom and experience was invaluable. Being a commercial beekeeper, I would be pretty reluctant to hire somebody whose goal was to run their own bee business. You get real quick into a non-compete clause. Yes, you can come work for me and I'll teach you beekeeping, but when you leave, you're not going to beekeep here.
Right.
Because I'm going to teach you where the spots are, what to do to have those there, who the farmers are. You're going to have their contacts, and then you're going to get started. And next thing you know, we're going to be bumping heads about who's putting bees where, and we're going to overpopulate an area with beehives, both causing problems for pollination and honey production.
But where it's a succession planning kind of situation, that can work really well.
Boy, that's one of the things about bee management and bee success is it is 100% of your energy to it when it needs to be there. It isn't 8 to 5. It isn't 8 to 4. It's more 8 to 8 plus bee moving at lots of times of the year. So to start off, I want to be a beekeeper, a commercial beekeeper. There's a big step there that goes from enjoying the bees to getting these things done on time at a level that's big enough to provide extra beyond what the bees need. And it's a certain person who gets away with it, and it's a lot of other people won't do as well. You could probably draw that up into the success based on the number of hives they're running is proportional to that ambition and fortitude that the person doing it in charge provides. Employee does not provide that very often. They want to go home. If you overwork them, the work gets loud. I won't say lousy, the less effective. The work gets less effective. And I find 8 hours is a good number for the employees to do. If you start adding more to that, those critical hours where they're making decisions in a beehive, that decision won't be as important, and you'll get less. Your results will be less.
Well, thanks for that, Nick. Harry, do you have any last questions you want to ask, Nick?
Well, I'm sure, Nick, that we see that in ourselves too. I know, you go down to California and you're paying for a motel room and meals and the people you bring with you, and at the end of the day, you just get really tired and you start cutting corners. And so I totally agree with you. It's like there is a limit to how far you can stretch yourself, but to achieve the level that you have, it definitely is, like you said, is definitely admirable fortitude displayed there for people to see. It's always been very, very inspirational to me. That's for sure. We didn't bring up your pickup beds that you make.
Oh, I want to hear about the pickup beds.
And so Nick actually fabricates everything around him, buildings and all. And we can talk about the geodesic dome some other time.
I bought that.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to build one, but I was looking at, I was going to use up all the available time and then some, just figuring out how to do it. When the kit showed up in a little crate from China, we put it together. The truck beds is going specifically with fabricating. If beekeepers needing more trucks and welding isn't a problem, draw up your truck bed and take it to the fab shop, and they'll bend your metal and cut it and build it. And it's a huge savings. When I built the one on the International, I got a quote from a truck builder in Salem. I think it was $13,000. Well, I spent less than $3,000 to build it myself.
There we go.
It was 3 inches lower than the one they would have built. I won't say it looked better, but it didn't look any less.
Can you tell us just what makes up the ideal, truck bed and sort of accessories on the, what have you learned? What's the kind of like sweet spot of? So for truck beds, I like to make them, and I got this from Dave. The one he had on the old Super Ford, he had made out of stainless steel. So the front, the back, and the two side rails and the head rack were stainless steel. The structure of it that sits on the truck is mild steel. You can run your forklift into that thousands and thousands of times, scrape all your wax off with your hive tool. It's still silver. It doesn't rust. It Really?
still looks good. And it's more expensive than mild steel. Probably not much more than aluminum, but it's tougher. It's tough. It's hard. It doesn't dent well. It scratches, but it doesn't rust. I sold my first truck, which had 250,000 miles on it. If I would have taken the time to wash the bed with the little scrubber, it would have looked notably similar to the one on the new truck that had 10,000 miles. Just looks good. And that's me. When I'm loading with the forklift, I drive my mast up till it touches the truck. So I'm constantly hitting it with the forklift. Not hard, but and the stainless holds up well. The other advantage, when I build a truck bed, you set your two rails on the frame, and then all of the cross members are welded in between those and out from those, rather than a 8-foot piece sitting on top of it. So you lose 4 inches of height that way. So I can make a truck bed. Mine are generally about 36 inches high at the wheel, the rear wheel, where most of the ones you see people that have been purchased are going to be 40, 42 inches high. Some of them are worse than that. So when I'm carrying my valuable, precious, hard-earned box of honey to the truck and I have to set it up there, if I can save 4 or 6 inches of lifting, all the better.
What about features for storage and things like that? What's your kind of style for attaching that?
Or as far as the building, or as far as
No, like
truck?
smoke places for smokers, places for.
Okay, so we just buy basically a underbody truck box, probably 24 by 16 by 16. And then you have to figure out how to mount it. And you end up somebody crawls under there and welds a little down bracket on it and welds it to the top of the box, or makes an angle iron thing the box sits in and gets bolted to. That is, it can be either bolted to the frame of the truck, or it can be somehow attached to the box. And we just have one on each truck. The perfect world, I put it on the driver's side so I can get my smoker out on that side, but it always ends up on the other side, where the guys can get their smoker out. And your burlap ought to go, well, burlap behind the seat of the truck makes your truck messy. However, it's a B truck, it's going to be messy. Harry and I have had arguments about that. Because he borrowed the truck once of mine, and he was mortified at how messy it was. And I smiled and said, that was pretty good, actually, compared to sometimes. But
one of the things that happens when you start fabricating your own equipment is when you fabricate it and something goes wrong, you go right to the problem because you designed it, and so maintenance is a lot faster. I wanted to bounce off of something that Nick said about farming something out to another company to do. Sometimes you get in a hurry and you say, you know what, I just don't have time and I got to get this going, and you pay someone else, and I almost always regret it. I got down to California. I'd had someone set up the bed in the box. I turned into my motel and the box fell off onto the ground. Big metal box. I could have been doing 60 miles an hour down with a load of bees, and that could have fallen off on the freeway. And so it teaches you a lesson over and over. Every time you pay someone to do something, you end up turning around doing it yourself anyway.
I have a matching story of that. I paid truck outfit to put an extra fuel tank on the International because it had a 45-gallon tank, which was laughable. Anyway, they mounted it on there, and I told them I wanted it as high as possible. Well, they were about 6 inches shy of high as possible, and pulling out of a bee yard. Of course, I drug the bottom and ripped I shouldn't say this, but ripped the bottom drain valve off. And I think I heard it. I stopped and got out, and of course diesel was running out, and I'm 20 miles from anything. I said, well, I hopped back in the truck and I drove, sprinkling diesel the whole way, got back to the shop and grabbed a couple buckets and caught what was left of it. And then I went and bitched at and I ended up not using the tank anymore. I ended up selling the truck before I got around to fixing it.
Wow.
So, and that was just something, the guy putting it on there, he didn't know what I did with the truck, or didn't compute that any little rise coming out of the field or out of a driveway is going to drag, and it's a fuel tank.
Oh, geez.
Not going to hold up to it.
So that's one of the things I get to see when I go visit Nick is just this sense of self-reliance that I really appreciate and like to build into my work as well. And that's what it is. The quality you can build into your own fabrication is great.
And I love the idea that you actually know exactly how you're going to use that equipment, and that gives you the flexibility to work more efficiently, or in this case, to actually get the work done.
And also, when it breaks, it's going to be some stupid time. You're going to be really busy, or it's going to be in the middle of the night. We had a flat tire once coming home from Klatskanai on a trailer with bees. Isai was behind me, and he called and said, Nick, you got a problem? And so I pulled over and I looked, and this trailer that I'd borrowed had 3 axles, and the middle tire was flat. And we had just passed the truck scale. I think is it Highway 30 that goes out to Columbia. Anyway, that doesn't matter. I pulled around and drove over to the truck scale, which wasn't open, and parked, and I thought about it, what to do. Well, I can't drive it home like that. And I called my buddy, who's a night owl and sits in front of his computer, and he hunted and pecked and couldn't find any tire service in Portland that was 24 hours to come out to fix this tire for me. Whoa. So he ended up we thought about it. Well, there's 2 1-ton loads of bees on the truck. So he called another guy, another buddy, and they ran out to the shop and got 2 1-tons. We sent Isai home. They came out with the fork, or I guess Isai had the forklift. So we left the forklift there. And he went home. Nick and Rodney showed up with the 2 trucks, and we unloaded the trailer and loaded those 2 trucks and then drove home. This was in early June. We got home about 30 minutes after the sunrise was coming up. It's going to be 80 some degrees.
Oh,
I sent Jose with 2 of the trucks to go unload, and I took the other 2 trucks, and we put one in one yard, and the big truck, which had 170 hives on it, that went to 2 other yards, and just got away with it. And it all happened in the middle of the night. Nobody there to help. Nobody at all. If anybody's helping, you had to wake them up, convince them they didn't hate you, and then come help. And that was wiped your brow. Whew, got away with that. Let's not go to Pascanai anymore. Certainly with a trailer. I think that was the last year we went. I think we went one more year after that. And that was pollinating blueberries. And they would sit up there for 10 weeks. The bees would do really well, except they always came home starving. But they grew, populations went up really high while they were there. They had good solid bees coming home.
Well, Nick, thanks so much for this. I think this really kind of gave me a really great sense of the need for somebody who's going to be running a commercial operation to build these capacities in their operation and know that build equipment that is specific for what they need. Because clearly, when you're carrying bees and you're working late at night, working long hours, having something fail on you can really have incredible consequences.
Yeah, get you in trouble. Bees need to be off the truck by sunrise or soon after. A lot of those skills that you learned trying to build something come in handy at unknown times. Oh, I can do that now. And that happens all the time.
Yeah, so you're not just building equipment, I guess you're building a beekeeper at the same time.
Thinking about something else while doing it.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
You bet. It was entertaining. Thank you.
Try to find some time to rest, Nick.
I know the off season is already 3/8 done.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you so much for listening. Show notes with links from each episode are available at the website pollinationpodcast.oregonstate.edu. I also love hearing from you, and there's a form at the website where you can pop in and say hello and give me feedback. If you want to support the show, remember to leave a rating on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast mothership you use. And finally, if you have the means and you want to help support my lab's effort to document bee biodiversity in Oregon, visit OregonBeeAtlas.org and follow down to the donate button where you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Jerry and Judith Paul Native Pollinator Endowment. Every little bit helps. See you next episode.